I'm sure that you know by now that Baptists and Methodists, more than any other denomination, profited from the evangelical spirit of the Second Great Awakening. The reasons for their success, however, were quite different. Methodist success was connected with their use of circuit riders and camp meetings. Circuit riders were preachers who had multiple churches or preaching stations in a given geographical area, or a circuit, to which they rode via horseback, thus their name, circuit riders. On the frontier, where people were spread out and isolated, these traveling evangelists had great success. Methodists also effectively used camp meetings, large multi-day gatherings of preaching and worship. These events were organized in a central location, and families came from all around, and they camped out for a few days and listened to a variety of preachers. Some camp meetings, like the most famous one that you read about at Cane Ridge, were multi-denominational, but over time Methodists used this type of gathering far more than any other denomination. Baptist success, by contrast, has been generally attributed to the use of what some historians call farmer preachers. These were men, usually uneducated, called by God, who worked on their farms and homesteads during the week, like everybody else. But on Sundays, they stood and preached in small Baptist churches throughout the frontier and called their friends and neighbors to repentance. And the results were remarkable, both for the Methodists and for the Baptists on the frontier. Did you know that the Second Great Awakening not only impacted individuals with the message of salvation, but that a number of ministries emerged out of this time as well? One way that the Second Great Awakening differed from the First Great Awakening was that people were spurred to public action as a result of their encounter with Jesus. For example, the early 1800s was prime time for the emergence of organizations like the American Bible Society and the American Tract Society, who had the goal of getting religious literature in the hands of people throughout the states. The revival also sparked reform efforts related to hospitals and prisons in which Christians increasingly became involved. Organizations related to the abolition of slavery and the prohibition of alcohol were not far behind. Also connected to this revival was the emergence of the first missionary societies that began to send people overseas. And it was against this backdrop that Adoniram and Ann Judson made their way for India, and later Burma, where they spent most of their time, in 1812. Adoniram came to personal faith in the early 1800s after several years of struggle and doubt, but during this general period of revival. He also was part of a group of students at Andover Seminary who began to pray about the possibility of following the call of God overseas. He helped found one of the earliest Congregationalist mission-sending organizations and later surrendered to the call of missions himself. His soon-to-be wife, Anne, was also strongly influenced by this period of revival and increased missionary awareness. And when both Judsons became convinced of the idea of believers' baptism through their study of the Bible en route to India, the Baptists in America had their first missionary standard bearers. Baptists in America, who had been an independent-minded minority for much of their early history in America, suddenly had a reason to come together: the support of foreign missions, which they formally did in 1812. And I guess, more or less, Baptists have been coming together to support missions since that time. But the Judsons were the first, as they converted from their Congregationalist background to Baptist ways, and that really gave Baptist a rallying point in America for doing foreign missions, and the Judsons' impact was felt for generations as letters that they sent back to the United States were read, and those prompted other people to go and to pray and to give to the missions effort.